Hi, friends. Thank you for tuning in to the Concussion Coach podcast. I'm Bethany Lewis, the Concussion Coach. I'm a neurological occupational therapist and certified life coach, and I specialize in guiding people through their concussion recovery journey. I am passionate about helping people understand their injury, speed up their recovery, and reclaim control over their life post-concussion. The purpose of this podcast is to help increase awareness of concussions and the impact they can have on a person's life, and to bring hope to people who have suffered a concussion and those who love them. I firmly believe that sharing stories and knowledge about concussions will bring important light and understanding to this misunderstood and often invisible injury. The information in this podcast is meant to bring that awareness and hope and is not meant as medical advice. The opinions shared are those of the interviewees and my own. If you are suffering with lingering concussion symptoms, I have created a concussion coaching program specifically for you. I will be your mentor to guide you through your recovery journey, offering help with understanding and managing your symptoms, setting achievable goals, and learning how to manage your own thoughts and nervous system in order to get control over your life again. If this program sounds like something that would help you or someone you love, sign up for a free consultation. In the consultation, you'll get valuable information and resources and gain hope for your future. Sign up for your free consultation at the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Concussion Coach podcast. Before I introduce my guest today, I just wanted to make sure that you know about the free guide that is available on my website. It's the 5 best ways to support your loved one dealing with a concussion. If you have a friend or family member who is struggling with post-concussion symptoms, or if you're the one struggling and would like your loved ones to know more about what you're going through and how they can help, head over to my website, theconcussioncoach.com, and download the free guide. I'm so excited for our interview today. My guest is Melissa Urban. Melissa is the co-founder and CEO of Whole30, an authority on helping people create lifelong healthy habits. She is an 8-time New York Times bestselling author, and her books have sold millions of copies in more than 20 languages. She has been featured by the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, People, Forbes, Good Morning America, and CNBC, and is a prominent keynote speaker on health and wellness, boundaries, building community, and entrepreneurship. She lives in Salt Lake City, Utah, so we are neighbors, which is wonderful. And Melissa, I have to tell you, I heard your interview with Julia Manning on the Invisible Impact podcast through the Concussion and CTE Foundation, and I was so impressed with both of you that I reached out to both of you, and I'm so grateful and excited that I've gotten to speak with both of you. And actually, the episode with Julia sharing her personal experience with concussion should be coming out this week. So it's episode 126. So everybody should listen to that. And I just really was impressed by and appreciated how well you were able to speak to your experience and sharing, like, just articulating what it's like to have a concussion and the hope and positivity that you brought to the whole conversation. So I'm really, really grateful and excited to get to have a similar conversation. I want you to share what your experience has been, and I really believe it will be helpful for so many people. So thank you again.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. The more I talk about it, the more people reach out to me to say, thank you so much for talking about it, because it is such an isolating experience. So I'm always grateful for opportunities to share.
Yeah, I love that about you. I'm so grateful that you're doing it, because it is so isolating. I think people, it can feel so lonely. And because it's not talked about enough, people think that they're the only ones going through it. And they're like, am I crazy? Am I lazy? What's happening? So this is good. So let's go ahead and just have you share a little bit about the brain injury itself. Like, how long ago was it? What happened? And we'll dive in more as we go.
It was December 2018, right after the holidays. We were down in southern Utah with our families celebrating, and we took the kids to a fun center that had, laser tag and shuffle, like the ping pong. I'm losing my words, but that's concussion. But it was just this fun center. It had like go-karts and stuff. So we were playing laser tag. It was our second game of the day. And these, it's dark. It's all of these fluorescent blinking lights. There's loud music. There's a lot of sensory input. And the guns were these huge, heavy plastic things. And at some point, I don't know exactly what happened, but I was hit very hard right behind my left ear. I don't know if someone swung their gun and hit me or if I turned into it. I fell near a concrete pole. So I'm wondering if I went to duck and maybe hit that. I don't exactly know what happened. I did not lose consciousness, but I've heard the term "she saw stars" in books and movies before. I had that literal experience. I was very dazed, very out of it. People came over to ask if I was okay. I kind of shook it off, got up, and continued to play. The next day or two, of course, I had a really bad headache. I was irritable, but I blamed that on staying with family in a small house for 5 days during the holidays. And so the day after, when we drove home, I remember just not feeling great. I sat down at my laptop to type an email, and I said to my husband, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I can't really see. I can't really see the screen clearly. And he looked at me and said, babe, I think you have a concussion. And I said, no, absolutely not. That's crazy. That only happens to race car drivers and boxers. That's not what happened to me. And it took me probably far too long to realize that, yes, I had a concussion. These were the symptoms I was experiencing. And then I had to try to figure out what to do with it. But that was the accident in a nutshell. It wasn't the most serious hit. I did not lose consciousness. It just was one of those things that happens.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for saying that, because I do think that that happens so many times where people are like, well, it wasn't a bad enough hit, or it wasn't, yeah, we expect it to be worse and it's crazy. The degree of badness of the hit does not equal the degree of badness of the experience afterwards. Like how badly, quote unquote, badly you hit your head does not necessarily impact how much the later impact can be.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. It is like normal everyday things. These things can happen, and it can happen to anybody. And I'm curious, did your husband notice other things, or like, because you said that was the point where he told you, but were there other things that he'd been picking up on in the previous days?
I think he was concerned with it from the get-go. He had had concussions before, and I think he was concerned that I might have sustained a head injury. He saw how bad it was. He saw how long it took me to kind of come out of it. And I think he was observing me at my family's house the next day. So I started to notice, though, once he said, I think you have a concussion, I started to notice the irritability, the trouble I was having reading. Reading is my favorite hobby, and I was struggling with words on the page. I write for a living. I was struggling to write even a basic email. And but I kept kind of just trying to live my life, right? When you are a little bit sick with a cold, you sort of just try to power through it. And I didn't know anything else to do with this particular illness than just try to power through it. So I went to work, and I was supposed to travel, I remember just a week later, all the way across the country to do an in-person event with a friend of mine. And I remember my husband saying, you're not going to be able to travel. And I thought, that's nuts. Of course I can. This is old hat. I'll surely be better by then. And I remember about a week later, I had been working and going to the gym as usual, trying to exercise as usual and be a mom and run my business. And I had a panic attack in the middle of the gym. I had been through with my exercise and I just didn't feel good. And it was unlike any other feeling I had ever had. And I was not prone to anxiety at all. And I had this panic attack in the middle of the gym where I was hyperventilating and I was crying. And my husband said, you really need to go see somebody about this. I think this is all head injury related.
Mm-hmm. Was that a scary experience? I imagine, especially not familiar with that, like that must have been not pleasant.
It was terrifying. And also I just kept wondering, what is wrong with me? There's no comparable experience to this in a normal everyday day-to-day. I've had injuries before. I've broken bones. I've been sick, but this was unlike anything I had experienced. And I felt like I was going crazy. I felt like surely the hit that I took behind my ear could not have been so severe that it's leading to all of this. And so if it's not that, I must be going mad. And so it was it was confusing. It was definitely scary. And then I didn't know what to do. What are you supposed to do? I went to the emergency room, or like urgent care, and they said, yeah, you have a concussion. You should maybe like go lie down in a dark room and just sort of take it easy for a few days. And I said, that's it. So I tried to do that. That didn't help. In fact, it only made it worse. And now we're at the point where I'm thinking, I'm really scared. I don't know what's wrong with me, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to fix it.
Okay. Thank you again for sharing this. I do think people need to hear that, because that is sadly still a lot of people's experience. They don't know what to do, and it feels so crazy, and things that don't seem like they could possibly be related are happening and are related, but you don't know it. It is very, yeah, you said that very well. And I do think that it's very important for people to know these are all related, and it's real. It is real. You're not crazy. The brain impacts every aspect of your body, and so everything can be impacted by it. And we do know that exercise is important, but I know that exercise intolerance can be very common, and that sounds like what you were dealing with. So what was that experience like, the whole like figuring out exercise afterwards?
I mean, oh goodness, now we're talking about like a 3 or 4 or 5 year trajectory even. In the beginning, of course, I tried to continue to exercise as usual, and that was absolutely impossible. It was incredibly stressful. I think it brought on more symptoms. And I found out later that was because through my concussion, I had developed a POTS-like condition, nervous system dysregulation, that was impacted primarily by exercise, by altitude, and by heat. And so I'm trail running at 8,000 feet. I'm hiking at 10,000 feet. It's summer. I'm in the gym trying to do my workouts are pretty intense. So it's no wonder things were sort of falling apart. And so when I finally, the only way I was able to get the support and the help that I needed to heal is because I was talking about what I was going through on Instagram. And a physical therapist at Park City Hospital sent me a direct message and said, I think you should come in. This is what my team does. We specialize in TBI. We work with the US ski and snowboard team. I think you should come in. And I thought, you're really overreacting here, but okay, I'm still not feeling good. It's a couple months later. And thank God she reached out to me. This team literally saved my life, but I was able to go in, starting to do some diagnosis of primitive reflexes returning and vision and ocular symptoms, and then later on leading to this POTS-like diagnosis. But that's where the healing really started. And that's when I went back into the gym, not to do anything but my very simple, basic physical therapy exercises.
I love that she reached out to you and that you were able to find, yes, that they found you, but you found somebody who was able to understand what was going on and help with, because it is such a diverse grouping of things that need to be addressed. So I think I'm so grateful. So I know you mentioned a lot of the symptoms. Was there anything else symptom wise that you want people to know about that you experienced that was related that you might not have necessarily recognized right off?
Certainly. I mean, obviously the initial trauma was a brutal headache, but that didn't necessarily last. For me, my primary symptoms were personality driven and vision driven. And then later, of course, I would find out that I had this nervous system dysregulation that was prompted by a couple different factors. But for me, I was incredibly irritable. I was incredibly anxious. And again, this is not my personality at all, but it would manifest in me asking my husband 6 times if we knew where we were going, or reminding him 3 times, you're going to make the next right. You're going to make the next right. Did you call your mom? Are you sure your mom knows we're coming? Those kinds of things where I was just really hyper fixated and very anxious about everyday normal things. I was incredibly irritable. I could not tolerate noises, lights, people. I tried to take my son to a museum. He was young. I tried to take him to a museum one day and ended up having to leave him with my husband. And I went back into the car and just cried because I didn't know how to exist. I was so overwhelmed at just the smallest pieces of input. Reading was hard. Fluorescent lights were hard. Grocery stores are my arch enemy. When my concussion symptoms are so bad, it's grocery stores and airports. They are the worst place for me to be because of all the visual stimulus, the auditory stimulus. My eyes weren't working well together, and I don't really know how else to describe it other than it felt like, I now know it was a convergence issue, but I was having trouble reading. I was having trouble following. I was having trouble talking. I speak for a living, and I could not find my words. And to this day, that is still a hallmark. Oh, I'm in a concussion flare symptom. So it's all of these things that seem kind of unrelated. My not being able to be in a grocery store with fluorescent lights and also being anxious about whether we were leaving on time, they don't seem related. But when your brain is the thing that's injured, it's incredibly difficult for you to logically think through, what am I feeling? How is it manifesting? What should I do next? So it just felt like I was being assaulted with all of these different symptoms, and I didn't know how to navigate them.
So again, so well said. This is like all of that. I think you described so perfectly what so many people experience, and don't always have the words to explain. So thank you for putting all that out there. I'm curious. You mentioned that your husband had concussions himself, and everybody's plays out differently. How was that like? Was he pretty understanding of your hyperfixating and asking him over and over again, or was that like challenging on the relationship? Like how did that play into things?
It was definitely challenging for all of my relationships. Even there, most people didn't understand. They knew nothing about head injuries or concussions like I didn't. And everything they thought they knew came from movies or old school, well, just rest in a dark room and you'll be fine in a couple of weeks. So when I mean, there were a period of probably 2 years where I said no to almost every social invitation because I just couldn't. I couldn't be in a room with a lot of people. I couldn't, if I did have to expend that energy, I had to save it for work related tasks. So eventually my friends started getting annoyed that I was always saying no, or I would say yes, but then the day would come and I physically wouldn't be able to participate. My husband understood what I was going through, but of course it's hard for him. He knows, and he had so much empathy, and over time he learned to discern my concussion symptoms probably better than I could. He could spot a flare before I was able to recognize that I was in one.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to explain to my kid that I can't take you to do A, B, and C, or to my husband that I know you want to go out for dinner, but I can't go to this place because it's going to be loud. And of course, he understood, but it was still hard. It put a real strain on the relationship. Not only that, but I could no longer, for a period of a few years, I couldn't do things that I would normally do to improve my mental health. I couldn't exercise. I couldn't run. I couldn't hike. I struggled to read books. I couldn't connect with friends. I wasn't traveling as much. So I felt like my life had become incredibly small and I felt very lonely and it was very isolating. And the fact that it created friction in relationships, even when people were the most understanding, it just made me feel even more alone.
Yes, yes. And did it impact your, you mentioned work, like were you able to keep working? I know, but yeah, how did it play into your work
I know,
situation?
I I did too much and I'm certain I held my healing back. And also I run a business. I'm a CEO, I'm an author, and all of the tasks that I could delegate, I did. And all of the trips that I could cancel, I did. There were a few big meetings and events that I just could not attend. And it just was what it was. At the same time, nobody can write books for me. Nobody could, if I had a media appearance, oh, we got you on, the Today Show. Nobody could do that for me. And so I continued to push myself through work, doing what I could, and I'm sure it held me back. But what you tell me what working mother has the ability to just take 6 months off of everything, parenting, work, household responsibilities, exercise. Nobody can do that. So you have to just do the best you can to balance what you know is right for your healing with continuing to function. And I think it probably hits women and moms the hardest because we tend to carry most of the mental load and the invisible labor of household and childcare management. I'm lucky that my partner, my husband, carries more than his fair share of weight. But had he not, I would have been even more screwed.
Yeah, and again, you're bringing up so many important points that don't get talked about and that are absolutely impacting people's ability to recover and heal. And it needs to be talked about, it needs to be said, and support needs to be happening. I know that the Concussion and CT Foundation does have like a mom specific support group online. So if people are a mom and needs some extra help and like ideas of how to do this, like that's a good resource. But there are, again, I'm grateful there's more talking about it. There's more available, but it is like, it impacts everything. It impacts, and yeah, you just can't check out of life
No.
which is what is sometimes needed to really help with the healing. So it's such a hard balance to find. How did you find it? It sounds like it was a years long process, but what helped you in figuring out that balance?
Well, I mean, obviously, I had fantastic help with my physical therapy team, thank goodness. So I was able to specifically target the areas of healing that I needed to in the order I needed to. And I always have to mention how much privilege I have. I work for myself. So if I didn't show up one day until 10 because I was having a hard time, nobody's going to yell at me. I set my own hours. I work from home. I had childcare. I had a husband at home who was taking on a lot of household and childcare tasks. I had great health insurance that covered all of my physical therapy. So I had all of that going for me. But I think it was just a matter of, it really did feel like two steps forward and one step back for years. And
Mhm.
I would just have to continue to remind myself, okay, but you've gained a step here, even though it would be frustrating. And sometimes because of a work event, I would set myself back what felt like a month. And I would just have to be okay with that. Okay, this is something you can't say no to this. You have to show up for it. I'm going to do my best to mitigate the negative impact of this event. I'm going to say no to dinner and go back to my room early and go to bed early. And I'm going to try to limit as much exposure as I can, because I can get outside of the event. So I learned ways to sort of make these things I had to do less problematic or less troubling.
Mhm.
And then after that, you just sort of have to deal with the consequences and figure out how to move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do, when I talk to people who, if we're like trying to strategize, like, okay, you have this event coming up, it it is. It's a question of, is it worth it? Like, do I need to do it? Do I really, really want to do it? Because they're, like a wedding or something, like there are things that you want to do, even if you could step back from it. So, and yeah, just figuring out the degree to which you can do it, what can you do to prep and help yourself through it? And sometimes it is like, okay, it's worth it to me. I know I'm going to have a setback here. I know it's going to be putting me back a little bit, but it's worth it. And I'm going to do it anyway. And then, like
Yeah.
you said, just got to accept how that plays out afterwards.
But that
Um,
often required days of prep. It required, okay, I know I'm going to this event. It's going to be a 3-day expo at the Anaheim Convention Center. It's going to be people and lights and talking for 8 hours a day. That means for the week before, I have to say no to every single social invitation. I have to say no to taking my kid places. We've got to have a quiet, really down kind of environment at home. My family kind of got the shaft in these situations because I said I have to conserve my energy to do this thing. And then it was the same on the back end. I had
mhm.
a week on the back end where I had to be home and quiet recovering. So it's so much more complicated than just, I'm going to book a flight, get on the plane, go do the thing and come home, which is how my life used to be.
And people take it so for granted that they can do that. And again, people who are listening to this are like, yes, I'm there. I know exactly what you're talking about. They will feel so validated and seen by that. And I'm just curious, how did that, I, I imagine there was a lot of emotion around having to do this. Like I don't know, I just pictured like throwing a little fit about it. Like I haven't experienced it myself, but just like hearing it, and I've talked to so many people who have dealt with this. I like it would be so hard emotionally. And you said like emotions were already stressed because of all of this. How did you come to be okay with it to the degree that you are okay? Like I would love if you wouldn't mind sharing that emotional journey of acceptance of this.
I mean, it took years, and am I still 100% accepting? Definitely not. In the beginning, I did a lot of therapy. I had to go back to therapy because I knew how important it was, even in the earliest stages when I was the most, I think, affected by these day-to-day symptoms. I had to go back to therapy because I attached worth and value to myself as an active person. I thought of myself as an active person, and I didn't realize until that was taken away from me how much I had really absorbed that as my identity. I was active. I exercised and I ran and I traveled and I wrote books and I managed my business and I took my kid places and we did lots of family trips, and I couldn't do any of that now. And I really struggled with, what is my worth if I'm no longer an active person? So I had to do a lot of therapy, reassigning that definition of active to, I will remain present in my own healing. That is the activity that I am now committed to. And it was not easy. And it took a lot of work, but that was a piece of work that I did. Of course, I had temper tantrums. I had so many temper tantrums where I just thought, screw this. I'm just going to say yes and go do this thing because I deserve it. I deserve to enjoy my life, and screw this concussion. And of course, it would come back and it would bite me in the ass. And I would end up even more in the hole. And I would just, obviously that wasn't worth it, but it's so hard to, nobody's gonna, I think, take something like this and just be completely accepting and graceful with themselves throughout the way. So
Yes.
there were a lot of temper tantrums. There was a lot of pushback. There was a lot of rebellion. But over time, I think I had to learn that this was my new reality. There was no more I just stopped telling myself that I wanted to get back to where things were before, because that was not happening. That was no longer an option. Whatever this looks like after, I am a different person. This has absolutely 100% changed who I am, how I engage, etc. Not in a bad way, but there was no going back. So then I had to say, okay, well, what does my current reality look like? What things can I be grateful for in my current reality? What can I look forward to in the future? And that is not easy. And if someone had tried to make me do that kind of gratuity exercise early, or gratefulness exercise early, I probably would have punched them, because I wasn't ready. I will never try to shove a silver lining onto anybody. But over time, I naturally gravitated to that. And I think that was a really important piece of my healing, and also my own mental health, really.
Thank you for that. Do you feel like that reassigning of worth has been like a positive thing for you? Like how has that impacted your day-to-day today? Like how you see yourself and that identity piece?
I definitely show myself a lot more grace, and I definitely recognize better now. I was never the punishing myself type, at least not in the last decade or so. It wasn't like I went to the gym to punish myself, or to, because I felt like I needed to sort of exercise my demons. That wasn't why I went. I went because it was positive for my mental health, and it feels good to move. But I'm definitely more graceful with myself. I definitely now recognize more the importance of rest and caretaking and recovery as part of my fitness and health journey. I recognize that sometimes the best thing I can do to improve my health is to rest, or is to recover. So that's been helpful. I recognize now that being an active person can mean a number of different things. It can be interpreted in a number of different ways. And also that my worth and value is not attached to the fact that I am active, because when I am inactive, I still am me. I still have all of these things that nobody can take away from me, the values that I hold, my empathy, my kindness, my loyalty, my generosity. So again, it was work worth doing. And sometimes you don't realize that your roof is leaky until it starts to rain. And I don't think I realized how much I had attached my worth and value to my active person status until it was taken away from me. But in retrospect, I'm glad I went through that exercise. I definitely think it's helped my mindset going forward.
Thank you so much. I hope people hearing that can feel that and like take that into, because I do think that this is a very, very common experience for people who are dealing with this. When it's very common for us to assign our value to the roles that we play and the things that we're able to do. And then when we can't do, then what do we have left? And it can rock our world. So I appreciate that perspective. And do you have any words of wisdom or specific advice that if somebody is feeling like that, like I can't do anything, so what is my worth? Like, what would you say to them?
I mean, I'd have to, I think, distill 2 or 3 months of therapy about that.
Okay.
I did do a podcast on one of the most important therapy sessions I did around my concussion, and around the fact that I felt like my active person status was where I held my worth and value. So maybe I'll send that to you if you want to put that in the notes. But
I would love that.
I think I want to attach my worth and value to the things that are always present in me, the things that, as I said, nobody can take away from me. And that is not the fact that I'm a mom. It's not the fact that I'm a CEO. It's not a fact that I'm an author or successful or active or fit. It's the qualities that I embody. Those are where my worth and value are held. So regardless of what my life looks like, if I'm fired from my job and never write a book again and have to, pause in all of my fitness to heal, I still am that kind person. I still am that thoughtful person. I still am that loyal person. I still have that empathy for others. So that's what I've chosen to focus on. Sometimes it doesn't feel quite as validating. We love that external validation, right? Oh my gosh, your workouts are so hard. You look so fit. Or, oh my goodness, your book did so well. Congratulations. Of course, that feels good. But if we accept that external validation to prop up our worth, then by default, we have to accept the other side of the coin, which is the criticism, which is the fact that when you lose those things, you now have agreed, you've made a pact that they get to be taken away from you. And so I've worked really hard to let external validation go, because that also allows me to prop up my own worth and value with my own internal assessments, regardless of what anybody else says or thinks.
Yes, yes. Amen. Beautifully said. Please do send me that podcast. I will
Yeah.
definitely link that in the show notes here. Yeah, thank you. That in and of itself, I think would be like the perfect podcast right here. Just like that conversation was so good.
Thanks.
So I would love to hear though, as you know, I like to have people share what treatments and therapies were very helpful for them so that people listening can be like, oh, maybe that's worth looking into. So I know you found the physical therapist at Park City. What other things were included in that PT? What were the things that were most helpful for you?
Yeah. So obviously the physical therapy, we started with primitive reflexes. Those had come back as a result of my head injury. So we had to sort of send those back into dormancy and reestablish that kind of nervous system connection. We focused a lot on vision training. I did Brock string stuff, and I swear my PT would make up exercises just to see if I would do them. She was just so evil, but it would be, she would have a ball and she'd throw it to me from the periphery, and I'd have to catch it, and I would have to say a food that starts with the letter A and then B and then C. So she's throwing the ball. I'm having to catch it out of my peripheral vision, think about the next food. These are the kind of exercises that I did to try to teach my eyes to work better together, to try to teach my eyes to work better with my brain, and just to try to kind of get all systems go. That took a very long time. When it came to the nervous system dysregulation physical therapy, it was all about stressing my nervous system just to the point where it would start to become discombobulated, and then backing off and seeing if I could recover from that. And that was how I continued to kind of calm my nervous system. So it was a lot of really slow walks, like slower than your grandma. And it felt so boring, but that's what I needed to do before I was able to hike outside, before I was able to run. And so there were months and months spent doing that. I discovered along the way, completely accidentally, that for my symptoms, cold showers were a magic pill. My concussion symptoms are still flared by heat. I still can't do saunas. I have to be careful in hot tubs. Even exercising in a warm yoga studio is still a no-go for me. But for some reason, cold makes it feel better. And so I discovered cold showers after reading this book in 2021, I think, or 2022. And I was like, what the hell? I've got nothing to lose. And the first time I tried it, I was like, this is going to be magical. My energy, my focus, my mood tremendously improved. And so I think I took a cold shower every single day for an entire year. And I
Wow.
credit it with helping my symptoms so much. So that was something that, like, your mileage may vary, but that was really helpful for me. I did some hyperbaric chamber therapy, some hyperbaric oxygen therapy at a local wellness clinic. Again, it was sort of, some people said it was helpful. I thought I'd give it a try. I actually did find that pretty helpful for my symptoms, especially in the acute resolution of symptoms. It was expensive, and it was obviously more time consuming than a free cold shower, but that was another resource that I found helpful. I tried all kinds of things, some of which helped, some of which didn't. But for the most part, it was just my physical therapy exercises and a lot of patience.
Yes, that's so much patience.
Yeah.
Though, thank you. That's a really good summary. I'm curious, if somebody was like, I want to do like the cold showers like you do, and was it a certain amount of time? Was it just like
Mhm.
the whole time was cold, or did you start with warm, and like how did it look?
Yep.
What was it like?
I have a podcast episode
Oh,
about this
perfect.
too. But I will
Excellent.
tell you, it started off with getting into a warm shower and then turning it down to like pretty cold and just trying to stay in there for a minute. A lot of people talk about cold showers in terms of fat loss. I think that's sort of one of the more old school ways where you get into the cold shower and then you shiver, and that shivering tends to affect brown fat more. That's not what we're doing here. What we're doing in the cold shower is when you get in and that water becomes super duper cold, you are going to gasp and hyperventilate. Your nervous system is going to be on high alert. And what I am doing in my cold showers is I am teaching my nervous system to be calm, even in the face of a stressor. So it was get in, make it cold, pretty cold for 30 seconds. And then the next day it was get in, make it cold, see if you could do a minute. And then it was get into it eventually morphed into get into a lukewarm shower, immediately make it as cold as you can. And I would sing like 2 or 3 Ed Sheeran songs. We're talking about 5 to 8 minutes, which is overkill. But after a minute, I would say by the minute and a half mark, you're like, oh, okay, this is fine. I'm pretty used to it. And then it just became kind of habit. But what I learned was I would get in, the water would go super duper cold. I wouldn't hyperventilate. I wouldn't panic. I would just take a little deep breath. Humming or singing stimulates the vagus nerve, which is
Mm-hmm.
helpful for nervous system regulation, which is why I started bringing my phone in and singing in these cold showers. But I think it really helped me because nervous system dysregulation is essentially your blood pressure and your heart rate and your going haywire in situations where they should be calm. And so the more I strengthen my nervous system with these cold showers, I really do believe that it helped the physical therapy that I was doing at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. If you can get your nervous system to be able to be more regulated, that makes a huge impact on the capacity of your body to take in the physical healing that it's working on and the
Yeah.
therapies and things. So that's fantastic. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing that and
Yeah.
all of those tips.
You do have to be careful though, obviously, right? The point is to stress your body and your nervous system only to the point that you're able to recover from it. So it might not be a good fit for everybody. Staying in for that length of time might not be a good fit. If it's adding more stress than it's relieving, that's probably not the right therapy for you to do. So there was always that balance there, which was you want to stress, but you can't stress too much. But if you don't stress it enough, then you're not going to recover from that. You're not going to get stronger. So there was always this sort of like playing around period where I had to
Mhm.
figure out, did I do too much? Did I not do enough?
Yes, yes. And it is constantly like that. I mean, that's always, we always need to looking for that just right challenge where it is stressing it, but it's not, but doing it too much so that anyway, yes, you well said. It is very important. And a really key part of that recovery is that stressing it and letting it calm down and doing that trains the nervous system to know, oh, it is possible to feel overstimulated, to be in that hyper rest state and to come back down again. And so that training is so helpful and so important. And I'm so glad that you found good things and good people and things that were helpful for you. Um, I'm curious. I know well, you talked about going to work and doing all the things. When did you start talking about the injury and what you were dealing with? Because that's, I think, sometimes hard for people to know when and how to broach the subject with their work or with other people or whatever. Like, if you could speak to that, that would be very helpful.
I started talking about it really early on social media, like right when it happened. And I think just out of a I share pieces of my life on social media. I'm active and it was something I was navigating and it was a curiosity to me. Like, I think I have a concussion. This is so weird. I'm just going to share it. And then within a week, I had to announce that I was no longer going to be headlining this event that I was supposed to speak at all the way across the country. And so I had to explain I had a head injury and I'm still not recovered from it, which I'm glad I did talk about it because that's what led to the PT reaching out to me. But I continued to talk about it throughout my entire treatment. If I was in the middle of a flare and really struggling, obviously I'm not going to subject myself to showing up on social media and trying to be articulate. But when I recovered or when I felt well enough, I would share my journey. And every time I would share, somebody would reach out and say, "Thank you so much for talking about this. You helped me realize I had a concussion. You helped me know what to do for my next steps. You helped me figure out how to talk about it with friends and family." So that continued, I think, my motivation to talk about it and to share my experience and to talk with other people about their experiences and share some of the exercises that I was doing. And there were times where I would be in the middle of a flare and I would record myself on Instagram stories and I would say, "I'm flaring. Here's what it looks like." I remember doing a story once showing people that when I tried to cross my eyes, one of them would cross and this one would just go look off into the distance, doing its own thing. And I'm like, this is what I mean when I say my eyes don't work well together. So it became a little bit of a connection tool for me, I think,
Mm.
to feel less alone and let other people know they weren't alone. But people were honestly just interested. They didn't know anything about concussions, just like I didn't. So I felt like I was educating other people at the same time that I was getting the education.
Yeah, what a gift that is. I'm so grateful that you are doing that and using your platform and your influence to be able to help spread this awareness and let people know because it is, yes, people need to know and they need to
Yeah.
be able to recognize that. I think there's so many people out there who are dealing with concussion issues that don't even know that they had one. So
Hmm.
it is, I'm so grateful that you're doing that. And I'll just put out there too, you shared, like when I reached out to you, you got back to me right away. So I appreciate that you're so like active and intentional about making sure that this information gets out there to people. So thank you for what you're doing there. I think it's
Yeah.
so
It's a
important.
small club. We're a very small, very niche club. And
Yes.
especially when you're talking about women, especially when you're talking about not the subject of athletics, right? Not the field of
Yep.
athletics or sports. So
Yeah.
I will take any opportunity I have to talk about it and share.
Yes. Awesome. I love it. Um, What what advice would you give to the family members, the loved ones, the people who are trying to support someone who's dealing with this? Um, what was helpful for you, or what would you just like, what advice would you give to them?
I know this is so hard because it really is a case of until you've been through it yourself, you really don't know what people are experiencing. I will tell you that I spent a lot of time feeling like maybe I was faking it. I would question my own lived experience so much because other people didn't understand. I looked fine. Most of the time, I talked normally and could work and I was functional. And so I think it was hard to explain to people, I know I look fine, but here's what's going on inside and here's what it means I can't do. And it wasn't easy for people to understand. I think maybe some people thought that I was exaggerating, which made me wonder,
Mhm.
are things really this bad? Am I just being a real baby about it? Am I being too sensitive? So that this doubting myself, I think, was one of the hardest pieces of it. I developed such empathy and compassion for people who have invisible illnesses and conditions because it's not like a broken arm where you say, "Oh, I can't play pickleball today." And they look at your cast and they go, "Yeah, okay, that makes sense." It was like, "I'm sorry, I have to, I have to go to bed at 7 o'clock after Thanksgiving dinner because I just can't handle any more conversation and I can't play card games." And it's like, that's weird. What do you mean?
Yeah.
So for family members, hopefully talking about my experience and listening to it helps people understand some of what their family members are going through. I know I'm sure it can feel hard to be patient and it can feel difficult to just not understand and sort of take that person at their word. But one piece of advice I would give, whether you have the concussion or you're supporting someone, is you have to trust your lived experience. I would have people that would say to me all the time, "Are you sure that what you're experiencing isn't menopause symptoms? Because it sounds really similar." And much of the time, I had enough capacity to say, "I appreciate you reaching out like this, but no, my concussion symptoms feel very, very different." But it can be very, very hard when you have people saying, "Oh, that sounds a lot like my menopause symptoms," or "That sounds a lot like, my COVID. Are you sure you don't have COVID right now?" And it's like, I need you to trust that I know my body and I know what I'm experiencing and I know what a concussion flare feels like. And it is very different than a cold or menopause symptoms or a hangover or whatever else you wanted to compare it to. And it can be, you have to be really confident in trusting yourself to navigate those kinds of conversations because they come up a lot. So
Mm.
going back to family and friends, like, please trust the person that you're talking to know their own experience. And there's one thing I could ask, it's just believe them.
I can't tell you how many times that has come up when I've had this conversation with people. It's believe them. It is such a gift to someone to take them at their word, to recognize that you don't understand their experience and to just let them express it to you or not express it and just be there with them while
Yeah.
they're in it. Yeah, yeah, thank you for that. And I hope that the family and friends hearing that can take that in. I do think just from again the sheer number of people who has said that, that is really, really key and probably the most important thing that you can do for your loved one,
Yeah.
is to believe them. Um, Thank you for sharing that. I'm curious, given your passion for nutrition, have you discovered anything in relation to nutrition that you would think would be very helpful for people who are struggling with PCS to be aware of?
It's funny, the literature at times suggests that a ketogenic diet, a very low carbohydrate diet, might be helpful for those with TBI. And my experience was the exact opposite. One
Mhm.
of the things that happens when your brain is that inflamed is that it creates systemic inflammation through your whole body. And of course, I had a lot of downstream effects with hormones and my period and my cycle and all of these different sort of lab test measured effects. But what it did for me was it ramped up my cravings in a way that I have never before experienced. I don't really I don't really have cravings. I don't have food noise. But what I found was that because of the incredibly high level of inflammation throughout my body was under an immense amount of stress. And when it's under that immense amount of stress, it wants fast energy. And my brain was not processing energy effectively. It was not able to convert the energy I was giving it effectively into the energy that it needs to run. I'm trying to like keep it super simple. So because I was having trouble with energy access, my body was saying, we need quick energy now. And that's sugar, that's processed carbs. And so I was navigating cravings in a way that I never had before. And I thought at one point, well, maybe I'll try going really low carb. I know that doesn't work for my body normally, but maybe in this situation it would. It only made things 10 times worse. I considered briefly doing a Whole30, which is an elimination program designed to reduce foods to which you might be sensitive. And although I didn't really think I had a lot in my diet that was contributing, I thought maybe it would help. I was unable to restrict my food to that degree at this point, the kind needed for an elimination program, because my brain was just screaming at me to eat. So
Yes.
that was another area that was completely unexpected, is that it would change my cravings and my dietary patterns and habits. All of this to say, I don't think there's a one size fits all solution. And I do think you have to kind of honor what your body is going through right now. Now is certainly not the time to deny yourself energy, to try to modulate or restrict food choices or food groups or meal timing. If you're working with a healthcare professional, registered dietitian, or doctor who has experience here, and they, suggest protocols, definitely give them a try. But now is a time to be as nourishing for your body as you can. And that means giving it enough energy to try to heal. And ideally, sure, that stuff is coming from whole, nutrient dense foods.
Mm-hmm.
But that was near impossible for me to stick to, especially in the earliest stages. And so again, this goes back to, I just gave myself a lot of grace. I was like, you're healing, you're really having a hard time. Let's not beat yourself up for the food you're eating right now.
Yes, thank you so much for saying that. And yeah, that is exactly what people, your brain needs energy. So it's not the time to be restricting significantly. So thank you for that and that perspective. That's super interesting and helpful. I know we've kind of mentioned this, but I would love to hear lessons that you've learned through this experience. Like looking back, kind of big picture, what your takeaways? I know that might be a hard thing, so if that's too broad of a
No,
question, but I'd love to hear what you've learned from it.
I mean, definitely, talking about the attachment of worth and value to like the things that you can do, that was a huge lesson for me. Learning to trust myself, I think, was another one. I already had a lot of trust in myself and confidence in myself, but this required me to advocate for myself in a way that I never had before. And I'm a pretty good self advocate. I'm not a people pleaser. I don't need to meet other people's expectations. I'm really good at checking in with myself, but I had to do this to a degree that was uncomfortable even for me. People would say, I need you to do this. And I would say, I cannot. I will not. People would say, but you did this last week. And I would have to say, but I can't this week. I mean, it really required me to stand up for myself because my recovery depended on that. Nobody else could do it for me. So I
Mhm.
think that was a big lesson too, this idea of not only trusting in yourself, but advocating for yourself, even if it disappointed other people, even if other people didn't understand, even if sometimes people were mad. I had to protect my healing at all costs, because if I don't have that, then I can't do anything for anybody or myself. So I think that was another big lesson and something that I'm grateful for.
Yeah, thank you. And I do think that that's can be particularly hard. It sounds like it's a really good lesson to learn and to get good at, and I'm sure everybody could improve in that. Like it's something that everybody across the board is would benefit from improving in. But um, yeah, trusting yourself, especially like learning yourself, and it has to take time. Like especially at the beginning when you're not even sure which way is up. Like literally, sometimes we don't know which way is up when we have the concussion. Um, that that process takes time. So and I hope people hearing that can see like this has been a process of time for you, and you've come with these really beautiful, really significant lessons that have come from it. So thank you for sharing that. Because that's Yeah, those are significant. Do you feel like, are there any I want to say like hacks or tips or things that you like to go to? I know you like mentioned the cold showers were very, very helpful. Are there anything else that you want to share as far as like things that were helpful with calming your nervous system, your favorite things that help you to
Mhm.
de-stress and get out of back into that parasympathetic state?
Yeah. I had earplugs on basically 24/7. I used to use those loop earplugs. I'm not sponsored or anything like that. I just bought a million pairs, but they just dull outside noise. They're not noise blocking like headphones are, and they're just plastic. There's nothing going through them. But I would pop those in at airports. I would pop them in grocery stores, anywhere where I felt like the auditory input was intense. And it really did help to dull my senses to a degree that I felt like I was less overstimulated. So that was super helpful. I did an Erlin screening. If you're familiar with that, it's a vision screening that essentially helps you identify whether viewing pages in a book, as an example, through a specific colored filter can help your eyes relax and absorb information better. I don't exactly know how it works. It's Erlen, IRLEN. I did it very late in my concussion journey. So it's not that it wouldn't have been helpful. It was that I was already well on my way to healing my vision issues. But had I done that earlier, I think it could have been helpful. We discovered that
Mm.
a translucent lilac shade of paper over the book I was reading would help my eyes relax. Don't ask me how it works. It sounds like some kind of voodoo, but my physical therapist recommended it. And you can find an Erlin screener, anywhere in the country. I found one here in Salt Lake. That's something that I think could have been helpful for people to do early on. So I think that's another maybe piece of the puzzle. Earplugs, sunglasses. I mean, I wasn't afraid at all to wear sunglasses or blue light blocking glasses, basically anywhere if I needed my vision in check. At home,
Mhm.
I never turn on the big lights still. No big lights, no fluorescent lights. I would walk into my PT's office and the receptionist would be like, "Do you want me to turn the lights off?" And I would say, "Yes, please." So
Yes, do
anywhere I
that.
have control of that kind of stimulus, I think is super duper helpful as well. And
Mhm.
then just setting expectations around events. Like, I want to go to this birthday party. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go a little early so I can get some one-on-one time with my sister and the birthday boy. I'm going to stay for a little while. I'm going to let them know ahead of time that I'm going to bounce when things get overstimulating, and then I'm going to leave. So kind of figuring out how to show up in ways that still work for you, but let you do what you want to do has also been really helpful.
Ah, yes, 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 yes. That's awesome. And I don't think anybody's ever recommended the Erlin screening before, so
Yeah.
thank you. Something new here.
Yeah.
And yeah, that talking to people ahead of time, setting the expectations and protecting yourself, like again, that's kind of self-advocacy, doing the things that you need to do to take care of yourself. So good and
Yeah.
so important. And yeah, I hope people hearing this can be like, yes, I'm gonna do that. It's really, really important. And we're getting close on time here, so I just wanted to ask you how what has your relationship with hope been? I know I like to ask people like, how have you maintained hope through your recovery journey? And so many people are like, I haven't. Like it's hope is kind of a tricky thing sometimes. So what is your relationship with hope, and what would you say to someone who is in the middle of a setback and they feel like they're in the two steps backwards?
Hmm.
What would you say to them?
It's easier to be hopeful when things are going well. And when I have a flare or a setback, of course, it's frustrating. What helps me the most is remembering where I started and realizing that I really have made such tremendous progress from sitting in the middle of that gym, crying in the middle of a panic attack, to being able to run and exercise and travel and hike. And so I have these setbacks and they are really frustrating. Sometimes they come out of nowhere. Sometimes they come because I can't help it. Sometimes I deliberately do it to myself because I know what the situation I'm in is going to be rough. But I as much as it really sounds very Pollyanna, really thinking about the things I am grateful for today. I mean, I don't think I've ever before realized how much I take my health for granted, how much I take my ability to read or speak or write for granted. And now I don't take any of those things for granted. So, yes, setbacks can be difficult. Absolutely. They can last a really long time, which for me really sucked. But remembering that I have support, I know what I need to do to get better. I'm going to take this into account the next time this kind of situation comes up. Could I have mitigated it more? Could I have avoided it altogether? And really, I like to take that feeling of despair and frustration and turn it into action. For me, that's what feels proactive. It's what helps me to feel like I'm reclaiming my power. So I would allow myself to sit in it. I would allow myself to have the tantrum and be ungrateful and just be pissy about it. And then once I got that out of my system, because that deserves space too, I would say, okay, what went wrong? What could have gone better? What am I going to do differently next time? What are the things that I can do today that I wasn't able to do 5 months ago? And that's, I think, what would keep me moving forward.
Yes, beautifully said. And I think that that action of like, what can I do now? And I appreciate you mentioning too that you know so much more now. Like, you know things. And I do think, because that can be scary for people who are, if they're in the middle of this or they're having a setback and they're like, oh no, the big, I think a lot of times for people, the biggest frustration is the not knowing, that limbo of like, what is this going to be the rest of my life? Is this going to last? How long is this going to last? How impactful is it? Are more things going to leave my capacity, or am I going to, like, what is it like? What is it going to be like? That's the big scary thing. And so I think that, bringing it to the moment, like, okay, no, actually we have done this before. These are the things that I know that help. And even if, even if a re-injury occurs or whatever, like, you have so much more knowledge and experience that you're in a better place to be able to handle it going forward. So, I think that's helpful and important. So thank you for sharing all of that. Anything else that you want to make sure, like, I don't know, we've covered a lot and it's been so good. I'm so grateful for all that you've shared. Is there anything else that you want to make sure people hear or understand about concussion or your experience, motherhood, all of the things that are tied into this, before we head out?
I want to remind people that the vast majority of concussions are resolved within 6 to 8 weeks. I'm such an exception. Lucky me. I won the lottery and I'm one of the, small percentage of people who are navigating post-concussion symptoms years later. But someone will have a head injury and they'll send me a note and they're immediately thinking that this is going to change the rest of their life and it's going to take them years to recover. And I always remind people the vast majority of concussions resolve quickly within 6 to 8 weeks. The sooner you get seen, the better. So the sooner you seek out somebody, a neurologist, a physical therapist, an occupational therapist with experience in concussion or TBI for evaluation, the better your prognosis. The faster you pull that kid out of sports or that kid out of school or yourself out of the event, the better. There was a really interesting study on kids and CTE playing football. And it was the kids who had a head injury, but their coach sent them back into the game, that took more than twice as long to recover from that concussion. So what you do right away can be really important, but please don't go into it assuming that the rest of your life is going to be navigating all of these permanent changes, because statistically, the odds are very much in your favor. And if you do find that you're struggling still 6, 8, 10 weeks out, now I do think there are so many more resources and guides and help than there was even 7 years ago when I first got my head injury. So you do have more help and support than I think we ever have, especially for women.
Yes. Thank goodness. I'm so grateful that is the trend. It looks like we're trending that way, and people like you who are making that happen and bringing the awareness out there. Thank you so much. If people want to hear more from you, if they want to learn more about your experience or learn from you, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram at Melissa Yu. My website is also melissau.com. That's where you'll find those podcast episodes I mentioned about my concussion and cold showers. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Perfect. And you do have great content. It's so fun to look at your stuff. So thank you. Thank you so much for what you're doing and for coming today. I really appreciate it. And I know this will be so helpful for so many people.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm so glad you listened in today. I hope you have gained some helpful insights and inspiration regarding dealing with and recovering from concussions. My goal is to create more awareness and education about concussions and the fact that there is so much that can be done to improve life after someone has had one. Help me spread the message by liking, commenting, rating, and subscribing to this podcast, and share it with others who would benefit from hearing it. There are more resources available on my website. And again, if you or someone you love would benefit from concussion coaching, sign up for a free consultation using the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Thank you. See you next time, and take good care of that amazing brain of yours.